I think Indraksha is there. Okay, so just heard that the recording is in progress, so please be aware this session will be recorded and hopefully made available to you afterwards. And so, yeah, let me talk a bit more about our programming then in terms of where we're working. So going back to India, India is one of the regions in the world that has the highest digital gender gap at 23% in cell phone ownership and 51% in mobile internet. Oh, and this is for, let me just say, this is for South Asia as a region. We also work in the region of Sub-Saharan Africa. And so that actually has the second highest digital gender gap at 13% in cell phone ownership and 37% in mobile internet. Some of our partners we found in Sub-Saharan Africa, we are seeing that there are digital gender gaps averaging around 20 to 30%, and sometimes as high as 50% when it comes to mobile banking. So this is cell phone banking using your phone to access financial services. So that's one area that our team is really working diligently to address. We're trying to figure out what are those challenges and barriers that female customers in these different areas, locations, the different segments of women, for example, what are they facing so that we can better understand how we can close these gaps that are existing. And so that is why we're here today. We've asked you to come alongside us and discuss the digital gender divide, some of those key barriers that many women are facing, and so that we can just share some ideas, some best practices on how we can really be efficient in closing these gaps, efficient and effective. So your contributions will help us drive our efforts in digital financial inclusion. So with that, I say a big thank you for your time. We really are so encouraged by you coming out and having this discourse with us. And with that said, I know we have a great group here with us, so let me start by just asking if you could just kindly introduce yourself so we can get to know each other a little bit before we dive into our conversation together. So Rosa, could you maybe kick us off with that?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rosa Wong. I'm the Global Director for Digital Financial Services for Opportunity International.
Great. How about Liz? Do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Liz Kendall Jones. I actually was introduced to this forum last time by Cliff, who is one of your members. And I actually don't work any longer, but I was working for Vodafone for many years in their global division. I did spend some time living and working in Ghana. So my knowledge and experience is not up to date, as it were, but I do have some historical knowledge of when I was working in those countries and with the global division of Vodafone.
Great. Sinead?
Hi, so my name is Sinead Lynham. I work for the Irish League of Credit Unions. It's an apex body for the credit union movement in the north of Ireland and south. And they have an international development foundation. So we provide support to local partners in Gambia, Sierra Leone and Ethiopia to establish sustainable credit union movements. And my colleague Andrew, only yesterday, sent me on the information about this roundtable. I suppose we do a lot with women, particularly in very rural communities in relation to financial inclusion, but the level of digital financial services, that's the part of our new strategic plan. I suppose we wouldn't do enough on that yet, but we are looking at ways as to how to integrate that and to, I suppose, ensure that women have that access to ethical savings and loans.
Great, that'll be amazing to hear more about the work being done in Ireland. Thank you. Jocelyn, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Jocelyn. I'm the Director of Business Development at Everyone Mobile. We focus on creating mobile websites and apps that support people in low-income communities across Africa and Asia with their real-world behaviors. So this is things like savings behaviors or financial literacy and training, as well as challenging harmful social norms like gender-based violence. So financial inclusion is one aspect of the thematic areas that we focus on, among others. And of course, women is one of our priority groups as well.
Great. Isha?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm one of the founding partners of TLG Capital. We're a private equity and private debt investor in sub-Saharan Africa, and we've been in operation for over 10 years. We've generally focused on a variety of consumer goods, but focused specifically on healthcare as well as financial institutions and fintech, and therefore kind of the gender issue within that very interesting to us. One of our largest investors is Swed Fund, and I know gender is a key theme for them. So again, it's very important to us.
Great. And Drakshi.
I'm Indrakshi Banerjee. Let me introduce myself as saying that this gender issue is not only close to my heart, but also I really resonate very much with it. I have been a banker for the last 17 years. Then I quit my job to follow my husband as he traveled to Africa. I traveled to Botswana. I traveled to Uganda. I raised my daughter. Now I'm back to India again, and I'm ready to come back to full-time employment. This gender issues, inclusive finance, and impact finance has been very close to my heart, and I have worked with this in my earlier assignment. But I really resonate with this gender bias because I find that returning to work after a career break is especially challenging and overwhelming for a woman like me. So when we speak of, removing gender bias, when we speak of diversity, we speak of something, but on papers and on reality, things are very, very, very different. I've experienced myself, but today I'm a part of this roundtable because of my interest on the subject. And I would like, and as I'm keen to know more about what is happening around in the world and what different organizations like Opportunity and others are really doing on the field for removal of gender biases across the globe. So that is
great. Wonderful. Thank you, Indrakshi. That's such a great way to start the conversation. I love that. So gender bias is certainly at the heart of the discussion. I absolutely agree with that. So yeah, I am excited to hear what others are doing and happy to share about Opportunity. I think Rosa will also share, and we're hoping Christy, who's our one of our Opportunity partner representatives, will hopefully be joining us to share about work happening in Ghana as well. So excellent. Yes. Okay, and then before we move on, I think some of you know Matt and Daniela, who are also on the call. So they are the organizers of this event. So a big thanks to them for doing all the hard lifting for this. So they will listen in and hear all of us as we engage in this conversation and be taking notes for us. So thank you for that. Okay, so the way that we structured this one is we wanted to hear a little bit about what's happening at Opportunity so we can share kind of the problem, right? If we structured it as, here's the problem we lay out for you, and then let's start thinking about what other experiences, what are your backgrounds, your expertise areas that can tap in and kind of help us along as we think through some of our issues. So let me start, I guess, with Rosa. Rosa, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just ask you a few questions to kick us off, and then we're going to, after hearing our perspectives from Rosa, I might share a few things. Christy will hopefully be with us, and then we'll go into an interactive dialogue with everyone, and I'll continue to pose some questions, but really it's our opportunity to just feed off of each other. As you hear and have more ideas, just jump into the conversation. Fortunately, there's not so many of us that we have to be so strict in terms of how we manage that, but feel free if you want to raise your hand or put something in the chat to get my attention, just speak up. Absolutely welcome to do that. So Rosa, maybe I'll have you start with some more background specifically about the work being done at Opportunity to help more women adopt digital financial services. And then if you could share some of those key barriers that we've identified along the way.
Great. So one interesting thing I think to point out, the digital financial services as a formal program at Opportunity is about a decade old. So we've been working on this for about 10 years. I would say the first 3 or 4 years of this, it was run what in the industry they would tend to call gender blind. In other words, we had certainly Opportunity has always had the majority of its clients are women, as Dana mentioned, around 85%, sometimes in some places even higher. But we ran many of the programs with an understanding that we needed to establish an understanding and interest and sort of fluency in digital across all of our clients, including men and women, and offered the training services and all of the approaches, again, on a relatively, as I say, gender blind or gender neutral sort of basis. And it was only after about 3 or 4 years of the intensive work that we both started to explicitly measure and get a sense of what was the gender gap. And we found in some places it could be as high as 30 to 35%. So in other words, the percentage of male clients that would actively use the service versus the percentage of female clients, we would get a gap of somewhere like in the 30% areas, especially upon launch. And then so we started to emphasize much more, which I'll let Dana unfold some of the things in terms of some of the measures that we wanted to do. But when I went on the ground and as we were starting to develop more approach, recognizing that the women had sometimes additional or compound barriers, among things we were looking at were certainly the literacy levels. So we found that oftentimes the women had less years of formal education or less sort of fluency, especially in the main dialect or other things. So there was a basic literacy component. There was the phone ownership issue, although we have seen that over the few years with the work of Opportunity, we have seen that sort of shift quite a lot. I think initially we did see more women without a phone. Increasingly, we are seeing more women with phones and more availability of phones. One of the things that really struck me in terms of a barrier, and I'll give an example, when I was in Bhopal in India, and I was sitting with a group of about 14 women. We're sitting around in a circle in someone's hut. And this was one of the trust groups. So in other words, the women had taken out a loan. They had sort of vouched or co-guaranteed each other, so members of their group. And I asked these 14 women, do you have your own mobile phone? And only 2 out of the 14 had their own phone. In fact, they had them in their hands. But this was a lower number than I was expecting because the connectivity in this area was very, very good. It was fairly close to town. I think that was not specifically an issue. And yes, it was a very low income group, but I was expecting maybe about half. The next question I asked was sort of, do you have a phone in your household? And every single woman said, yes, it's the husband's phone. And so they had identified that even though there was a phone in the household and they had made the investment, or the family had made an investment prioritizing the use of the phone, that they didn't think of it as a device that they owned or could have access to. And then when I asked, I persisted and continued to ask questions. But what came about was this sense that the women sort of did not self-identify that I am or I can be a mobile phone user. And I think there was just a lack of identification, a lack of confidence in terms of using the device. And I think this has now been sort of woven through the work that we're doing, that it's not just to have services that you're providing that are digital. It's not just to have a device or a device, again, within the household, but that many of the people, but particularly the women, needed to have sort of a boost to their confidence, in a sense that they also, in addition to their husbands, also can be and should be digital users. So those were some of the barriers that came about, and I'll let Dana and maybe Christy address some of the ways that we're trying to address these.
Yeah, great. Let me hand it over to Christy. Christy, welcome to the call, first of all. Sorry to hear about the time difference that Ghana now is 1 hour behind the UK, and that's not always the case. Half the year it's on the same time zone, so there was a bit of confusion there. But welcome, Christy. We're really glad you joined.
Thank you.
Great. So maybe this is a great opportunity, Christy. If you don't mind, why don't you jump in, tell us a bit about yourself and your role, some background about how Opportunity Ghana is helping more women start to use digital financial services, and then what are some of those barriers that you found along the way?
Thank you. I am Christy, and I have been working with Opportunity for about 27 years now. It's been exciting, and
Christy, I think we lost you. Are you still there? All right, we see you now, Christy. We lost your voice for a second. Uh-oh. All right, we could try one thing. If all of us turn off our videos, it might be a bandwidth issue. So if you don't mind bearing with me, turn off our videos and let's see if Christy can speak to us. Christy, are you there? All right, unfortunately, we can't hear you.
hello, can you hear me now?
Ah, we can
Hello?
hear you now. Yes.
Oh, great. All right. Then let me start. I am Christy, and I have been working with Opportunity for over 27 years now. It has been really exciting, especially working with the transformation department for about 10 years. And I currently serve as the head of the transformation department. And my team and I are required to establish and coordinate the implementation of our transformation strategies, as well as our services and programs, which aims to empower both clients and staff to become confident and socially responsible. We do this through training and tailor-made development mechanisms. We also lead the promotion of a balance of social and financial considerations in planning, objective setting, and execution so as to avoid mission drift. Opportunity International Savings and Loans was licensed by Bank of Ghana in June 2004. And we started operations as a non-bank financial institution in September 2004. As of March this year, OISL had served about 584,703 depositors with loans, deposit products, micro insurance, and other transformational non-financial services. Our active number of borrowers stood in March as at 37,001, with 63% being females. And we have branches in 10 out of the 16 regions of the country. The institution has served the people of Ghana by providing financial solutions over the past 17 years through a wide network of 36 branches, 5 agencies, 19 ATMs, and 4 mobile vans. We have 21 of our branches located in the rural areas. OISL has a gender gap in mobile banking around 30 to 35% the past few years. After identifying those issues that have created the gap, OISL has put measures in place to close the gap. Although we know it might take time, we hope to get there. We are addressing this issue by providing regular training for both small and large number of clients, even during this period of the pandemic. We encourage these women to attend the training by feeding them and providing money for the transport. We also give out phones to some of them who do not have mobile phones. Now, touching on the barriers faced by these women, some of them we have identified to be not technologically inclined. And some of them too think that the charges and fees are high for them and it's not affordable, by their standards. Some of them think that they do not have time because they are saddled with house chores and a lot of other businesses. So it becomes difficult for them to make time to learn how to use our digital services. Some of the barriers are lack of phones or sometimes limited access to mobile phones. Some of them too is illiteracy. They are not literate, and numeracy is also another issue for them. So it really doesn't attract them to use digital financial services. Other women also think that it's no benefit to them. One, they do not have phones, they are not literate, and so they think that it's no benefit to them. Others too don't have trust in the service, and at the same time, they think that it's not secure because these days mobile or digital fraud has increased. And so if they get involved and they lose their money, what would become of them? So some of them think that it's not secured and they do not trust it. And the last one, the last but not the least barrier, which is connectivity. Some of them who have tried have been saying that the connectivity is poor, and so it's not attractive to them. While some of them have tried, they go tell their colleagues the problems they had with connectivity, and so some of them begin to shy away. So basically, that's what I would have to share with you for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Christy. That was really interesting and helpful. So I would love to get going with our discussion together. So let me just quickly summarize the barriers that have been mentioned already, all right? And actually, if you don't mind, I'm just going to copy the ones that I heard into the chat real quick so that we can build off of that list. So here are the ones that have already been mentioned. So education, low levels of education, levels of literacy, maybe language issues, right? Low levels of numeracy. We have lack of technology access. So ownership of phones, for example, is an issue. And then we have issues around gender norms. So it being perhaps seen as the man's phone, right? Or women just not self-identifying as a user at all. We have also seen cases of lack of confidence in using it or even trying something new. Maybe affordability is an issue. These are the clients we serve are primarily low income entrepreneurs. And for many, there might be a lack of time, which I think relates very nicely. Is it really time or is it really relevant to them, right? So both of them were mentioned by Christy. Thank you for that. And then going into issues around trust. Do they trust the institution? Do they trust the technology? It might be a security issue. We've also heard clients say, you know, if it's on my phone, my husband's more likely to see that I have an account, right? I keep that account secret from him. I don't want them to know that I have this account. So then you have, you know, privacy issues and security issues. And then lastly, Christy mentioned connectivity, right? A lot of our clients are in rural areas. A lot of them work in agriculture. And so even just having the chance to use something that's reliable and dependable just isn't a possibility. So these are some of the many challenges we've come across. I'm sure we can think of others as well. But let me quickly summarize the ways that we are working as a team to tackle some of these issues. So Rosa mentioned we start often with the data, right? Who are our clients? What's going on? What is this gap? Let's first identify that. Understand our clients better. What are the barriers in the way? So we often try and use research to take a lens at different groups of clients that we've identified. And this could be older women, for example, might be a segment that we focus on and really hone into those barriers. What's in the way? It could be a language issue, right? So sometimes we're using SMS as a primary way to send financial information. And then we start to realize a lot of people aren't reading those messages. They can't, they might involve their children to read it, etc. And so we started really experimenting with voice messaging, which the last few years we found to be very successful. So we're using IVR to do a lot of campaigns to promote awareness around the products and services the bank has by sending a voice recorded call to these clients. And unlike a lot of us who sit in the UK or the US or elsewhere in the world, a lot of our clients actually appreciate these voice messages, which has become a huge lesson for us. They like being talked to by the bank, and you know, they feel like the bank actually cares for them to actually do it in a local language through a recorded voice message when the alternatives just are not that useful to them. So that's one thing that we found very successful. We also do a lot of emphasis on training. And so we have built female-focused training materials that are really drawing out empathy and embed empathy into those practices of doing outreach and training with clients. So how do we start to think of ourselves in our customer shoes, right? Customer centricity. How do we begin to co-develop things with them? How do we make sure that they are the ones that are being represented in the materials and the marketing content that's being put out there to help train them as well? We found another barrier is, you know, clients who will see the staff member and say, well, of course the staff member can use this digital tool, right? They're the staff member, they're educated, et cetera, et cetera. So we've also begun to look at how do we do peer learning as an alternative. So we have, you know, master trainers within our own customers who can then help their community members see that there's a role model who's actively using the digital tool that seems much more like them, right? So that's another effort that's going on. Let's see if there's anything else I can add to that. I think the other part is looking at the organization itself, the structure of the organization. How many women are represented on the digital team? Is it a team of all men that are developing the products, right? What about the use cases? Are they looking at the needs that are very specific to women and building that journey for the women in terms of those specific use cases that might be most relevant to them? So I think those are some of the things that we're also looking at to, make sure we build women as leaders within digital finance. And also as we're recruiting agents, thinking about the composition of men and women as agents as well. So we're finding, especially in India, that having more women agents is actually allowing us to really extend financial inclusion into types of populations that couldn't traditionally access financial services. These would be, for example, women that are very immobile, so new brides within a community in some of the poorest states of India, they may not be able to approach a male agent, but they could approach a female agent. So we've been working very rigorously on building more capacity to recruit women as agents, and also empower those women as agents to then extend outreach into their own communities. So let me stop there. I think we've said quite a bit. I wanted to hear from you. So let me jump in to see if maybe the first question for all of you is thinking through those challenges and barriers. Does this relate to you and your work? Is there anything we could add to the list from your experiences, just so we can start with the challenges and barriers and then work from there about potential solutions and working solutions? Would anybody like to start?
I would be happy to share a reflection, if that would be helpful. It was just sort of feeding into this element of relevancy. I mean, I from our experience with Everyone Mobile, I think completely agree with everything that's been shared by yourself, Christy, and others, with these different challenges. But one, just to sort of zero in on a little bit on the relevant side. One of the things that we found, and this was with COVID-19 content, but I think it's a lesson that goes across all content. One of the things that we found really impactful was when we were sharing COVID-19 prevention content with women who we work with in the sort of low-income communities in Nairobi. A lot of the content that was coming out of WHO and others just didn't really speak to their reality at all. It was hand washing with running water. It was social distancing. It was buying masks. And so one of the things that we did was we created our own content using, the sort of the registered and recognized content, but talking about things such as washing your hands with a bucket of water, making your own mask from a t-shirt, which is more cost effective. And I think this lesson very much feeds into what we've spoken here about the relevancy. If we're not creating content that is extremely relevant to that lived experience and that lived reality, whether it's financial inclusion or other thematic areas, it just won't resonate. And that can also then feed into these things around confidence, affordability, and time. You aren't going to spend your time, you aren't going to spend your hard-earned money on data if it's something that doesn't speak to you. So I would just definitely echo that and share that experience from our side.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn.
If I can just come in there, and I 100% agree with Jocelyn, because we had the same issue with our credit unions in Sierra Leone, like as social distancing doesn't work, and we actually created. We got some of the staff there to create some just very short videos, because WhatsApp is very popular in Sierra Leone, and some very short videos that could be then WhatsApped and people can watch them. But one of the things, and I know I noted in my introduction, is that digital financial services is something that we haven't explored too much, but it is as part of our long-term strategy. But in relation to financial inclusion, in the very rural communities where we work, we're currently piloting a project with a Canadian organisation whereby the most impoverished women in the community. They're not a full-blown member of the credit union, so they're actually as part of a graduation microfinance group. So they come together weekly, but they use a passbook. But the credit union passbook is very much money in, money out. This is your, so the pilot project is actually, we brought together some of the members and we've oralized the passbook. So for instance, we've used the symbols from the currency in the passbook. We've used the symbol of a woman with the bucket in her head and filling the bucket with water and taking water out of the bucket. So very much to kind of visualize, to help them visualize the whole concept of putting money in and taking money out. And this is, as we're hoping to evaluate the pilot project next month. So yeah, again, it's just a way. I know it's not the digital side of things, but it's just for us from financial inclusion. It's like we get them involved in it and let them tell you and be involved with what actually works. So they were involved in the whole design process. And the passbook now for that cohort of members is very different. And it's visually better to understand. So when they do become a credit union member, they have a better understanding of the concept of savings and loans.
Great, wonderful, thank you. All right, let's go to our next question then. So the next question is, how can women's needs, preferences, and challenges be better addressed in the design and delivery of digital services? So I think Sunid has said a few things already. Anybody want to add to that?
I'd be happy to share. I'm aware I'm talking a lot, so apologies, please, everyone else jump in. So one of the ways that we've worked at Everyone Mobile is using a sort of human-centered design approach. And that, I think, we found that really helpful in terms of looking at, I suppose, the nuanced challenges. I was also just reflecting, with quite a few of the challenges that we've highlighted here, the extent of those challenges or the nuances of those challenges will differ according to different areas. So, with connectivity, there's quite a broad range of what do we mean by connectivity? Is it only a phone call, or are there, are you going to have hotspots where you could maybe download content? And there's going to probably be quite a lot of nuance in that. Again, I think there's quite a lot of nuance with what sort of phone they have. One thing that we have been focusing on is, we have smartphones and we have very, very basic phones, but we also have a growing amount of smart feature phones, which can be maybe $20, but give you a richer experience than a purely basic phone, but are a lot more cost effective than a smartphone. And so there's, sometimes that middle ground. So when we do the human-centered design approach, we sort of look at all those nuances. They might not have a smartphone, but do they have a base sort of smart feature phone, etc. The other key thing that we do as part of that is one of the beauties of digital that I think we've probably all experienced is that you can get much more real-time feedback. So, and again, particularly we find this with smart feature phones. We're able to, with websites and things, we're able to track what people are doing and have strong feedback loops and iterative design. So not only are we doing human-centered design with the women, but we're constantly getting feedback from the women, finding out what's useful, what's not useful, what content resonates, what content doesn't resonate. And then through that, doing iterative design. So one of the things that we did, for example, on a program combating gender-based violence and changing social norms around gender-based violence in Nigeria, initially, we didn't see huge amounts of participation from women. It was mostly from men, which is great because it has to be both sides. But we realized that was something that was a struggle. And so we created closed groups, closed discussion groups just for women. And suddenly the participation rate skyrocketed. But the fact that we were able to do that, within maybe a month, as opposed to waiting 6 months to find out what was happening, those feedback loops and that iterative learning, I think is really helpful for helping us to have that nuanced response to the nuanced challenges that different groups will face.
That's great. Wonderful. I'd actually not come across that, keeping closed closed groups for those feedback loops. So it rhymes, lovely. So I think that's brilliant. What a great insight. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else, or let me throw out another question so we can either talk more about solutions maybe you've heard of other organizations using, or past experiences, what might work. We can go into, absolute blue sky thinking on this as well. But one question that comes to mind, and I think Christy also hinted at this, is, COVID, the pandemic, has really shifted things in terms of people's attitudes and behaviors. And I think Jocelyn also mentioned some of just approaching people about messaging on COVID itself, how that has to be so tailored and relevant for the populations. But when we think about the pandemic and the way it's really reshaping the industry and the market, what do we think of when we consider what are those challenges that are perhaps new challenges or emerging challenges that are coming from this, and also those opportunities as well for bridging the digital gender gap?
Dana, if I could raise one of the things that I've been sort of saying to people with respect to thinking about COVID and thinking about things digitally, the pandemic has created a lot of very innovative thinking about how you can deploy digital things, particularly like if you think about training. Now a lot of things can be done online or recorded or something like that. But it also creates a situation where we talk about the digitally excluded, where now the gap between those that are included and then the gap of those that are excluded becomes even more stark. So for example, like we have, Opportunity runs some very significant programs with smallholder farmers in our agriculture finance area. And there a lot, before the pandemic, a lot of training of farmers were done in person. You might go and look at a demonstration plot. You might go and hear someone, say from a fertilizer company, come and talk about best practices. But the group of farmers together, and then the farmers would discuss and they would talk about how they might carry on some of the things they learned. After they've stopped some of these in-person trainings and they've gone and they've said, oh, you can watch this video where the agronomist is taking you through very similar kinds of things. These are best practices. This is what you do with fertilizer. Unfortunately, the farmers who do not have access to the ability to watch such a video, as Jocelyn mentioned, now there are some hybrid sorts of ways, with sort of not quite with the smartphone, but some alternatives. But we do know that there are quite a lot of people who even the feature phone or even the data charges would be quite prohibitive. And so this means that before they could attend in person at least, and now they are sort of cut off from that training. So I just wanted to raise that although COVID has certainly improved the content that's available and the potential for contact, I think we still have to be quite mindful that for those that are still digitally excluded, if anything, it's made the exclusion perhaps even worse.
Yeah, thanks, Rosa. Really good. When we think about COVID and opportunities around marketing, for example, we often are finding, at least when it comes to voice messaging, that makes it very relevant suddenly, where financial services alone as a standalone kind of a messaging might be more like a nuisance because it more sounds like advertising. And one thing that I think has been really interesting is starting to integrate, COVID protective measures within those messages as a way to really connect to clients. And so I don't know if anyone else has found that as a similar experience or not, but I think, in general, just about how do we tailor marketing in general, with kind of digital services being more of the channel, right, through which things are happening. But what's really relevant to people's lives, how can we then see COVID as that opportunity to bring it all together? Anybody with any sort of marketing experience that can touch on this point? Or we can broaden it more generally as well, marketing to women in general. How do best practices make it so it's just not a pink it and shrink it scenario? I don't know if you've heard that expression, but obviously if we do bad practices around marketing to women, there's a lot of that going on. But how do we make it so it's that relevancy that stays at the core of marketing and engaging women?
If I could maybe share a reflection as well. I think we've also found the same, that, I completely agree with Rosa that the exclusion of those who can't access in this way has been heightened. But for those who can, COVID, COVID is something that affects all of us in one way or another to differing degrees, has been a really interesting, it's been a really interesting sort of almost mobilizing topic. And sort of, I think for all of us, even those who were probably using tech a little bit more, we've never used it as much as we are now. For all of us, it's been the sort of push. I think it highlights something quite universal though, which is about this, the content being relevant. Actually, COVID is relevant to all of us. Mm-hmm. But there's a lesson there in terms of that relevance. One thing that we have been doing sort of prior to COVID, but we've seen it again more now, is with that human-centered design approach, finding out what are the key things that are most important to those individual groups of people. And they may not be what we hope or wish or think perhaps should be what resonates. So, for example, the work we've done with women in Nairobi, one of the things we found out, we wanted to talk about health and hygiene and nutrition. And actually, that wasn't what resonated most strongly with them. What resonated most strongly with them was their journey as mothers or as mothers to be. So it was really interesting that we sort of did everything through that lens. So nutrition linked to motherhood, even financial literacy linked to motherhood, linked to, caring for the household. Conversely, when we worked with healthcare workers in Nigeria, those healthcare workers were actually private sector. They were medical vendors. So for them, they weren't first and foremost healthcare workers, they were first and foremost business owners. So we put all the lens of health messaging through the lens of livelihood, increased profit, increased income. You can provide better healthcare services to your customers, you're actually going to make more money. And we did this with shopkeepers as well, who ended up being de facto healthcare workers despite not being trained because of the communities they were working in. So I think it's a really interesting lesson from a sort of marketing perspective, as you said, Dana. We have to often think through the lens of actually what's going to be motivating to that person. And then we can bring in a whole range of other topics, which we really wanted to talk about. But if we'd gone in with that topic and that lens, we would not have got, interest, and it would not have been seen as relevant to those communities. But if we can find out what is the most motivating factor for them and what is most relevant, we can target it in that way, which is, of course, what marketing agencies do actually in their work. And we can take a positive lesson from them and use it, for the social impact that is what's important to us.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jocelyn. That's excellent. Okay. So maybe I can steer the conversation. Hello. Yes, Christy, go for it.
Hello, Dana. Dana, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Talking about COVID, as you have rightly said, it's all over, and it's a global pandemic. But the opportunities that came up in Ghana was that the government
Christy, I think we lost you. Are you there, Christy?
realized that because of the lockdown,
Christy, sorry, I think it's fading in and out. We are having difficulty hearing you. Okay, well, hopefully she will be able to join back. I think her connection might be weak. Okay, so let me go forward, and hopefully Christy will be able to say her point in a moment. The one question to add to the table, right? This is an open discussion with all the questions on the table now, is you know, what's the role of organizations? How do we prevent the gap? And then related to that, you know, some of you might be investors or working with entrepreneurs or in different capacities, telcos, all of these different backgrounds. How do we begin to think of the different types of digital gender gaps, and what are the roles of these different entities in those different sectors to do this? So any thoughts, experiences related to this, any desires?
I've been listening to great insight from all of you, but and I just want to make a point here. I feel that gender equality that we are looking for may not come absolutely by way of financial inclusion or digital inclusion, but definitely digital inclusion as well as financial inclusion would make a base for an equal society, wherein it'll at least give power to the hands of women who can think and decide what to do with that power. So for example, if they have an access, if I speak from the finance side, if I speak from the side of financial inclusion, I can say that if a woman is given access to the full range of financial services, at least she will start having their financial education. She will start to understand the society and the economy. First thing, the lack of access is the root of that gender inequality. That she is aware, that she knows that the phone, as Rosa was mentioning, that only 2 women out of 14 had phone, although the families had. That she is tuned to the idea that the phone, family phone, belongs to the man of the family. Those are ingrained ideas in our mind. The man of the family is the one who decides, the man of the family who has the device. So I guess the first thing that should come from development organization and the society is to tell or just put the idea in the mind that the power resides on the woman and she can access, she can use the services. So I guess to me, the gender divide is basically that, and to give the women the sense of power. And that she is ready to participate in the economy. As such, the woman is handling the entire household economy. In most households, it is a woman who is spending for the daily needs. She is doing the household budget and everything. But when it comes to the economy, it is not her, but it is the man of the family who is doing. So these are small things to me, and it is great listening to all of you and understanding what is really happening. So this is a small bit from my side.
Yeah, that's great. And it's not a small thing, is it? It's huge. I think the whole social norms and gender roles, it runs very deep. I don't know if all of you saw the report that came out recently, I think by USAID, saying that actually gender inequality is a cause of poverty. So I think before it was always looked kind of the other way around, that, if you have more gender equality, then you'll see less poverty, etc. But I think now, we're seeing that it goes both ways, really. And I think it's no small thing. I think it affects so many pieces of everyday life.
I'll give you another example. See, during this pandemic, my household maid, she's actually not coming. So I have to pay her salary, but I don't know how to pay. She's got a bank account. The bank account is in the name of her husband. She tells me that you can transfer my money to my husband's account. But she's not very confident because she feels that husband may not allow her to withdraw the money.
Yeah.
And otherwise, they would have taken cash. They would have taken cash from me as salary. But now she's not coming. I have to pay her somehow. How do I pay?
Yeah, major challenge.
She doesn't have a bank. Yeah.
Great examples too. Makes it so real in our minds. Yeah, absolutely. Any last comments or thoughts on this topic?
I just wanted to really thank Indrakshi for what she said. I completely echo everything that you're saying about, and it sort of comes back to the confidence and of course many other aspects as well. But I think it's such an important point, this sort of how you feel. And one way that, I think many organizations and we've also been working on is sort of supporting women to champion women, supporting women to recruit women, supporting women to support women. One of the things that we did when COVID struck was our existing database or existing online community of women in Nairobi. We mobilized many of them to become volunteer COVID prevention ambassadors in their communities, reaching people who didn't have a mobile phone themselves, and also encouraging those who did and who to come onto the site. So there was something there about, the women who we were able to access, empowering them to go and reach the women who we were not able to access or who maybe were not able to access us. So completely the echo that point that Indrakshi said, and also just to echo a point that Rose said at the very beginning, which was about measuring, that actually the importance of measuring this, the importance of recognizing where we aren't making as much progress as we want to, that in itself, the transparency in highlighting those gaps is actually a very positive and powerful thing as well. And I think that's something that digital, in the right way, can be very, very effective at doing. We know who is accessing our platforms, who they are, where they are, what they're doing, and that helps us to recognize our own limitations, which I think is really important.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I really agree with what you said.
Yeah, it's so great. Wonderful. This has been such a rich discussion. Thank you for all the many great points that have been raised. I have tons of notes in front of me and lots to think about. So thank you for this. I maybe
get a copy of this. Yeah. I mean, video, a recording of this because many a times a voice had dropped and I couldn't hear because of the reception issue. perhaps if you have a recording and can share it with us, it'll be good.
Yeah, we'll see that happens. I assume, Matt, that's feasible, right?
Helena?
Yeah, we'll find a way. Yeah.
And it sounds like Christy, you're back. Hi, Christy.
Oh, I missed almost the whole session.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We can hear you now.
So where have you reached now?
Okay, so we are just about to wrap up, actually, just in the last couple of minutes. Are there any final points or remarks you would like to make, Christy?
Yeah, I would say that organizations have to find a way of preventing digital gender gap by building the confidence of women to use DFS, provide them with more instruction time, and also identify what women care about and their common financial needs, and link them to the benefits of DFS to encourage them use the service. I'd also say that we should properly sell the benefits of DFS to women and what resonate with them, encouraging them so that they use the service. And I also ask that we try to eliminate or reduce risk and barriers, and then reduce our transaction cost, especially in Ghana, so that it would help. Because during the pandemic, peak of the pandemic, the costs were reduced, and we had a lot of new entrants. So if we should continue with that, I'm sure that the gap would get narrow and narrow each time. And also undertake promotional activities and in marketplaces and in churches where women are commonly found, to attract them, and then make deliberate efforts to put in promotional activities to reach women with tailored solutions. And if we do that, especially with our part of the world, I am sure that we'll close the gap sooner or later. So that's what I want to add. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thanks so much, Christy. That fits so nicely with what has been said already. So just to kind of bring this all to a close, let me just highlight a few things that are certainly on my radar now that I will definitely be thinking more about going forward. But some of the things that have been discussed here, it's about really looking at relevancy, right, through the lens of the customer. How do we take that human-centric approach in everything, in terms of starting from the ideation phase, the development of products and services, and then making it really focused around what is really applicable for them. And that, of course, might not be what's applicable for us, as Jocelyn mentioned. We talked a lot too about tackling gender norms, women being in positions where they don't have power, they don't have decision-making power in the home, for example. And then thinking through about how do we start thinking about the norms around the perception of women not identifying as someone who's confident or even that typical user of the technology. How do we get about these types of barriers? And lots of good suggestions came in, including learning loops, including tailoring in more strategic ways, segmenting better, learning from our data, making sure we're able to build out solutions that are absolutely relevant in terms of all the various use cases that are identified by the customers themselves. So this has been very, very fruitful. Let me hand over to Rosa, who might have picked out other things, but let's see, Rosa, what ways can we bring this forward in our work?
Thank you, everyone. This has been a very rich discussion. I particularly liked the emphasis in terms of the woman identifying and in terms of having relevancy to the woman and to things that speak to her. I think we heard this echoed from various people and at different junctures. I think this is certainly something we try to do. I think this is something we can even increase the emphasis. And as Christy said, to try to bring this into the work, and that there is a key role within the organizations, with the organizations that we work with, and especially in terms of a conveyance of things like risk reduction. So that's really, really helpful. I want to, again, thank everyone. As Dana had mentioned, we will have this recorded, so we will have the recording to be shared. And this is the second of our ongoing kind of roundtables. For the next roundtable, we are having discussions about the possibility of doing something in person, perhaps around in the London area, if that would have discussions. I think for all of us, this has been a great way to engage people who are in lots of different locations. So from a digital standpoint, that there's been the great benefit of that. But just stay in touch with us, because this is a great way that we find to engage the community and to share and collaborate on some of these critical ideas.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate all that you've shared, your participation, and we hope you will indeed stay in touch with us, and we'll continue to share ideas as we go forward. So really appreciate your time and all the contributions that you've made, and hope to be in touch with you very, very soon. So have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.